Hey guys, to help run the forums, host the website, and travel, we've introduced a universal service fee for in-depth coverage, including this video. The goal is to be transparent and unbiased. This is not an endorsement. It's a privilege to serve you. Let's get into it. Hey guys, what's going on? So I am here at the park checking out the EUNORAU FAT MN. It's a cute little electric bike with lots of punch on a pretty fat little motor. So let's go ahead and check it out. So if you haven't heard of EUNORAU before, EUNORAU is a company that does not so direct electric bikes from China. So they're a Chinese company based out of China. That's where they design the bikes and make the bikes, and that's where their origin is, like a lot of them. But they actually ship to Las Vegas, where they have a small facility, and then they ship out from Vegas to the destination here in the United States. So they have that, and they also have a little support system there in Las Vegas, which is kind of cool. So it's pretty close to getting as direct a electric bike from China as you can get, and with that you're actually getting a pretty good price. So this electric bike, as you see it here, this is stock. There's no additional accessories or anything. This is actually $11.99, which is a pretty cool point about the bike. So they actually have the price point at a pretty decent space, especially for everything you're getting. I mean, as a quick overview, you're getting a fat electric folding bike. These aren't terribly rare within the industry, but you got all the fixins. You got the metal fenders, you got a pretty good front light, you got the rack on the back, and pretty comfortable. So yeah, so right up at the front, we'll just go ahead and start there. You have a 20 by 4-inch tire. So that's a 20 inches diameter. It's actually pretty darn tall. You know, the wheel is 20, but with the height of the tire, you're actually getting something that's more akin to, I guess, like a 24 or so. You know, it's not small, not by a long shot. But the width of it is another really cool part about it, is that the width of this is 4 inches, and that's of course fat tire territory. Sometimes there's some bikes that are a little bit smaller, you know, for a different purpose, which is, you know, somewhere like a 3.5 or sometimes a 3. Those are still pretty darn big. But this one is definitely a fat tire and has a lot of comfort to it. I got these pumped up mostly all the way for pretty much 30 pounds of pressure, and you can still squeeze it. It still has some comfort to it. So that's a pretty cool aspect about the fat tire bikes, is they're kind of comfortable. I'm pretty sure that's what they're going for on a bike like this, based on the geometry and the rest of the equipment, particularly like the metal fenders and everything. You're probably not going to do a ton of off-road on this. This is mostly meant for doing some city riding and kind of being a little comfortable while still giving a lot of traction for some of the smaller obstacles you encounter. So you have a pretty wide hub spacing in here, 135 millimeters between there. You actually have a quick release, which is a cute little feature that you don't see a whole lot on bikes around this price point. So that's kind of nice. You have that on the front. The brakes are a 160 millimeter mechanical disc brake from ProMax. It's the ProMax 310 model. As far as disc brakes go, that's kind of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to disc brakes, but you know what, they work, and I can fix them a lot easier than hydraulic. So I actually kind of like that particular feature of them. They do stop, you know, they're a little bit noisy at first. They kind of wear in the pads a little bit, and then it kind of calms down. But yeah, they do a pretty good job, especially for the price. This fork right here is a rigid fork that's made out of steel, so you're not going to be winning any awards for the lightest bicycle. They do have metal fenders, which I do like a lot. My personal preference is metal fenders because they don't, you know, they don't get bent out of shape and start nicking on the tread for the tire, which is a really good point that I like about them. You set them once and they're good to go for many, many miles, so I like that. Coming up from there, you do have a pretty nice headlight. We'll kind of talk a little bit about this when we get to the electric system, but it's no slouch on there. They have a pretty standard headset and a fairly standard set for a stem. This is a folding stem, which is quite common on a lot of folding electric bikes. Let's go ahead and show you how to use that. It's not too much to it. Pull up on the latch with your thumb, kind of pull this out of the way, and then from there they swing down. So that kind of saves you a little bit of space if you lower the seat. I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. And you can actually get a pretty low profile on that bike, so you could probably sneak it under a desk or a table or so if you have some tight space as to where you want to put it. And of course, you just pull it right back up. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. And there we go, pretty close. Pull this guy back up, pull the handlebars back into position, lock them in, and you're ready to go. So that's pretty cool. The stem actually does telescope as well. So if you undo this latch, you can get it to go down a little bit or up a little bit more if you want more of a relaxed seating position. That's kind of what it is. I mean, folding bikes, one thing that a lot of people get the idea is that a folding bike would be good for kids because they're fairly low to the ground. That would be a good application. However, the reach extending your arms all the way over here, it's kind of tough. So if you got a kid with some Donkey Kong arms, they could totally get that reach and do it, but you do kind of sacrifice a little bit of their control over the vehicle, which is not something that's terribly popular with parents or kids, and it makes total sense. So with that telescoping stem, let's go ahead and lower it a little bit. I personally like to ride it kind of low when I'm riding a bike like this. There also is a quick release here for if you want to rotate the position of the handlebars within the stem in that axis. Most of the time I actually don't do that. That's mainly meant for either a quick adjustment if you want to change where the brakes are. Say if you're holding something and you want to change the brakes a little higher so you can reach them with your fingers a little easier. But it's actually for folding. That's kind of what they do, is fold the brakes out of the way so that you can collapse the bike. But I'll show you what this bike looks like when it's totally collapsed, and based on pretty much the big tires, that's the culprit. It doesn't fold super small the way that some other folding bikes would. It does fold, but not super small. So this particular point of folding the brakes out of the way, it's not something that I would do too terribly often with this bike. But continuing on with some of the mechanical features, these are the levers which do have a motor inhibitor in there that send a cutoff signal to prevent the motor from powering as soon as you pull on the brake. So that's a nice safety feature here. Quick barrel adjuster. These levers are pretty simple, nothing too amazing to them. You do have a shifter up at the front. This is kind of a standard issue Shimano SIS thumb shifter. So you press the plus button to make it a little harder to pedal, pull back on the lever to make it a little easier to pedal. Let's go ahead and jump all the way to the back of the bike and kind of tell you a little bit about that. So coming into the rear, that of course controls the derailleur, which is a Shimano Altus. This was quite the surprise when I saw it. Usually a bike in this price point, you see the cheaper Shimano Tourney. But in this case, I got one step up to the Shimano Altus, and I actually use this on my personal bike that I ride around the neighborhood. Not this one. Well, it is on this, but I also use it on my personal bike. Not a bad system at all. It's come a long way. And that's going into the rear cassette, which is a 13 by 38 actually. So the first 6 gears or so kind of follow along. Then that last gear, it's got a big range. It kind of jumps to a big tooth count in the back there. Of course. And the chain is kind of coming up into the 48 tooth chain ring up in the front. That's about like a mid-size. Sometimes you see folding bikes with a little bit larger, 52, 54. In this case with 48, it's a nice good size for that. Getting a lot of tension coming into the back gears. So these gears are actually pretty usable. It's not too uncommon to see the cheapest of the cheap when you have this setup here, like the Tourney, or maybe like an 11 to 28 with, maybe like a 40 or something like that up front. In that case, you don't have a lot of tension. That's kind of what it boils down to, is how much tension you're able to keep on the pedals as you're pedaling the bicycle along with power. And in this case, you have a pretty good gear range. So that's actually a pretty cool point about the bike that kind of surprised me. I do have a derailleur guard. It's mostly used for shipping. Hopefully you don't live in an environment where you bash up your derailleur too much. And if you do, you may want to consider a different set. But this case, it has a derailleur guard coming out of there to kind of protect that. Of course, it does add a little bit of weight, but of course, on a bicycle like this, I sincerely doubt you're looking at it for weight savings. Pretty standard cranks, 170 millimeter. These pedals are pretty cool. These are a folding pedal. So on these, you actually press them in and kind of rotate them a little bit. There we go. And it doesn't look like it saves a lot, but those extra inches, that will save you from a lot of scars if you dance around the bicycle a lot in your garage, or if you're moving it in and out of an RV or so. So it looks like a small thing when you have the bike all unfolded and everything, but when you fold the bike up and try to get it into a compact space, this little spot saves you a lot of room. These are a plastic pedal, so they're not going to last a terribly long time, but you're getting it for the folding aspect, and they do that very, very well. So other features to talk about. Of course, in the back, you have a mirrored set from the front as far as the wheel and the brake is concerned. But one small difference is that there's actually a slightly thicker spoke in the back to handle the torque coming from the motor, whereas up front they have a slightly smaller spoke. So that's pretty cool. You got a small little detail there. In the back, you do have a rack for panniers. I would definitely recommend a good set of double-sided panniers for this rack. This tubing looks a little thick, so you might not get some of the thinner hooks around there. You could. You just give it a try. If you have a set of panniers already and they have a really thin hook on them, something like that would fit around a pencil. This is a little thick. I would definitely put this thicker than a pen, maybe about as thick as a Sharpie. Hopefully that helps. But one other feature about it is that it doesn't really have a whole lot of space to link onto a pannier. Sometimes you see a super flat and stiff tubing down here. so you can actually get the little stabilizer on the back of the pannier bag. In this case, there's nothing here to latch onto, so you're kind of stuck with whatever you got here for mounting it and getting it stable. So a good set of double-sided panniers would certainly be fine on here. You got a little spot right here if you want to mount a little vanity license plate, or if you can figure out a way to get a set of lights attached to here. So the bike doesn't have a rear light that comes with it. I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that with the electric system. But if you have an aftermarket light, you can either put it on the tubing or you can get it on this spot here. So, but this rack does come with it, which is pretty cool. I technically prefer the bolt-on ones because they can break and I can replace them. It hasn't happened to me yet, but the racks that are bolted to the, or not bolted, the racks that are welded to the frame, I'm always suspicious that rack is going to break with something I put on it, like a pack of bricks or a child or something like that. So the bolt-on ones just give me that little bit of security blanket that I realistically have never had to utilize yet. So, all right, last couple things about the mechanical system. You do have a rigid seat post, so keep that in mind. This is a 27.2 diameter if you want to change it out for a suspension seat post. But one cool thing about the seat post itself, it does have the latch to get the seat up out of the way. So the seat actually comes out of the way so that you can get the battery out. Let's go ahead and do that and kind of transfer into the electric system. One last thing is you do have a Cell Royale seat, which has some pretty good gel in it. Doesn't look all that amazing, but it is pretty comfortable right out of the gate. It doesn't have like a long wear-in period or anything, so I actually like that. So let's go ahead and fold this out of the way. We will unlock the battery and kind of remove that pin. So when you unlock it, this pin will recess back into the battery itself. There we go. And then you can just pull up on the handle and the battery will pop out. Ta-da! Battery, of course, has that little contour to get around the seat post there. The battery itself weighs, I'll say about 9 pounds. You can go to electricbikereview.com if you want to check out the exact weight where we have it there. But this is a 48 volt 12.5 amp hour battery. So this battery is no slouch. Yeah, they've actually packed a fair amount in here. Slide that guy right in there. Ta-da! Go ahead and turn the key, and now we're in business. All right, cool. The key actually is required for, I guess, kind of an ignition. So the key has to be in here. And this isn't a bad spot for it, really. Sometimes you see the key that's being obstructed by the tubing for the seat stays. But in this case, the key is out of the way of the pedals. It's not going to be hit by the pedals or anything. It's not out of the way if you want to pull the battery out. So that's actually a good thing. I don't mind so much that the key is required for ignition in this case, because the key is nice and out of the way. So the key won't pull out when you have it in the on position. You can turn the bike off and pull it out, or you can unlock it completely and pull the key out. But when you have the bike turned on to actually use it, gotta have that key in position. So keep that in mind. Some people, if they live in a fairly easy environment with not so much theft, I've seen people kind of break off the end of this just because they don't want anything hanging out. But like I said, it's not so much of a concern because it's not in the way of any of the other mechanical features. All right, so moving on, let's go ahead and jump into the display. This is a fairly streamlined display. It's kind of compact, it doesn't tell you a whole lot, but it has the basic features. Have a 1 through 5 level of pedal assist, or you can turn it off. Of course, it shows you your speed, a timer, distance, and the battery level with 4 bars. You can cycle through them by pressing the power button. That will kind of cycle through a few things like your average speed or max speed, and then back to normal. If you want to get into the settings menu, you can press and hold the plus and minus button, and that will start changing a few things. Definitely confer with the manual if you want to start goofing around with stuff. I haven't done too much to this one. I haven't done a lot of customization. This does actually have a backlight to it. If you press and hold the plus button, that will turn on the backlight. We're in the broad daylight right now, so it's not going to show up too much. But it also turns on the front light. Maybe you can see that kind of glowing on my hand just a little bit. This headlight's actually pretty cool. I had it lit up last night, and yeah, it's impressive. It's a good little front light. I did mention prior that there actually is no backlight on this bicycle. Some of the EUNORAU bikes come with an aftermarket rear light that has AAA batteries with it. In this case, they don't have one at all. So, that's something to consider. I do actually like it when they have a set of integrated lights front and rear, but you know what? I understand on a folding bike, you got a lot of stuff going on that's on this little hinge. So we'll talk about the folding aspect after the motor. So yeah, that's the display and how to use it. Also on the bike is a throttle. In this case, the throttle is mounted on the left side with the display. So you don't have a ton of room on your thumb there, but you can actually just move this. It's pretty simple. Right under here is a Phillips head, so you can just put a Phillips in there, loosen it up, and kind of move the display around the handlebars if you want to. Not a whole lot of options or real estate on these handlebars because they're kind of short. You know, they're meant for the folding aspect, so that's one thing to consider. But the throttle is a thumb throttle, which is pretty cool. Thumb throttles are kind of fun sometimes because you can kind of goof with them a little bit. But let's go ahead and start moving back on the electric system. You do have an external set of cadence sensors, and it's actually 8 magnets on this one. It's pretty common to see 12 magnets. In this case, you're getting 8 magnets. The difference in that is that this is a cadence-based pedal assist system. So that means that the pedal assist is activated by you pedaling, and it is measuring how many times these little magnets right here are passing by that static counter. Of course, in this case, I'm going backwards, but yeah, you have 8 magnets on this disc. A lot of times you see 12, or maybe you'll see even more magnets. It doesn't really affect the top speed or the power output. What this does is it will read faster. So in this case, imagine the hand of a clock passing by, and each number is a point where it will activate. If you got 8 numbers, it'll activate a little bit quicker. In this case, if you have 12 numbers, it'll activate a little bit quicker. In this case, you got 8, so it's just not going to pick up as quick. So that's one thing that I'll kind of talk about on the ride portion. Down here, you have a controller. I haven't accessed it, but it seems like it's pretty easy to get into. So this is the motor. This is a 500 watt nominal 750 peak Shengyi motor. So this, of course, is a fat tire motor that's set for pretty pretty wide hub spacing back here. So yeah, this is a pretty beefy motor to have on here. It's utilizing the 48 volt 12.5 amp hour battery pack, and it does it pretty well. It puts out a fair amount of power. So let's go ahead and get on the bike and take it for a ride, and we'll kind of get away from the barking dog. All right, so here we go on the EUNORAU FAT MN. The wind is kind of picking up, so hopefully you can hear me all right. I asked the guys what MN stood for, and they told me it was for mini, that it was kind of like taking the vowels out of the word mini. I thought it looked like the word Minnesota, or not the Minnesota word, but the postal code, the MN. I actually really like the throttle on this bike. I got the seat all the way down, handlebars up a tiny bit, so that I can kind of just putz around and throttle. The pedal assist does kick in pretty fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a lot more fun to kind of put the weight low and pedal. Let's go ahead and climb up this little dirt spot right up here. Oh yes, let's come to a stop, and came to almost a stop, and here we go, throttling up. Oh yeah, this is fun. We're going about like 4 miles an hour. It's got the power, it does it, and of course the traction on the fat tires. I want to try that again. Let's go ahead and go down the handicap ramp, and you'll kind of get an idea of of the height of it. I like that throttle. Let's go ahead and put this motor to the test again. This is kind of fun. So yeah, let's go ahead and approach it. We'll kind of get a little bit ways up and then come to a stop, and then gun it again. It's fun. Of course, this is kind of a loose gravel sort of hill. All right, so here we go to a stop. Okay. This is fun. Woo-hoo-hoo. It can do it. You know, I got my personal weight back a little bit, and it's not too tough. Going up at about 4 miles an hour. Let's jump off of this real quick. All right, so the clanking that you heard was the metal fenders and the metal rack, all of that kind of crashing down all at once. Let's kind of do some turns. Woo-hoo. And you know what? It ain't so bad. You know, when you get some speed on it, those fat tires and having all the weight low, it feels pretty good. You know, as far as turning. If you're going kind of slow, or if you're kind of doing something tight, you know, then it's definitely a fat tire bike in those regards. But when you get some speed to it, it's actually kind of fun. So yeah, let's do a little bit more pedal assisting. I've just been using it as a throttle bike to kind of throttle around, but let's jump into the baseball park here. So yeah, I've had it in a fairly high gear this whole time. Let's go ahead and gear down. So like I said, with the 8 magnet pedal assist sensor, it doesn't pick up super quick. So if you're only doing pedal assist, and let's go ahead and change into, okay, we're in a really high gear right now, and let's go ahead and kind of slam on the pedal assist from a dead stop. Oh yeah, it takes oh man. All right, so yeah, that takes a little bit to actually pick up. Let's try again. I wonder if I can count how many revolutions it takes on that. Okay, let's go. Coming up to a stop at about a 90-degree angle on my right foot from... All right, and let's go. Ooh, yes. Oh boy. Okay. All right, in that case, so that's kind of the worst case scenario, is if you have your gearing set up for a super high gear and you're at a dead stop, because it takes a lot of tension, it takes a lot of momentum to actually get the sensor to pick up what you're doing. And in this case, you don't have a whole lot of sensor going. You got the 8 magnets on there. So it took me a good, 180 degrees on the pedals, meaning that I had to go from this position all the way over to that position. Let's go ahead and point it downward so you can see what I'm talking about. So I started here, and let's go ahead and just do it. So I started on one spot, pedal all the way down, which takes a lot of force, and then finally, whoop, what do we got? I think I'm going too slow because the pedal assist is not kicking in quite. There we go. All right. that took a minute. So yeah, I would not recommend doing that. Setting yourself up on the highest gear and then relying on pedal assist. Use that throttle, give it a little bit of goose and you're good, and you'll be able to propel yourself, because once you get going you can turn the pedals and you're fine. The pedal assist is okay, but I would not start that way. So if you're looking for a bike that's going to be more fitness oriented, something that's going to kind of read the pressure that you're putting in, this isn't the one. Those bikes tend to be a little bit more expensive. So in this case, you're getting a really fun bike to throttle around on. Something you can pedal assist if you want to save a little bit of battery. But I wouldn't call it, it feels a little bit more like a scooter and less like a bicycle. I guess that's a good way to put it. So yeah, let's go ahead and put you on the other camera angle and we'll go from there. All right, so here we go. I got you pointed down the battery and also at the bottom bracket for the EUNORAU FAT MN. Let's go ahead. I got it cranked up to level 5 pedal assist. Let's see what those 8 magnet pedal assist sensors can do and how quick they pick up. Let's go. Okay, so when I came up to the stop sign there, I gave it a little bit of throttle to kind of get going because I knew those magnets wouldn't kick in right away to kind of keep the momentum I wanted, but overall it really punches. Lots of punch. Okay guys, one last thing that I forgot to show you is actually the step-through model. So the one that I've been riding mostly is, I guess, the man style or the step over. They actually call it a man style when you go to their website. Nowadays we call them a step-through, or step through, step over. So this is the step over. This guy is the step through. It's actually pretty darn low. I'd say that's somewhere around maybe like 30 inches or so for standover height. But other than the frame right here, that's about the only difference. They're more or less identical. So don't get tripped up if you wanted to get a step through or a step over. But yeah, thanks for watching guys. If you want to check out the full review for the step over, including all of the specifications and measurements, I also have a couple of them for the step through, go to electricbikereview.com. While you're there, you can also go to the forums and participate if you want to ask a question about this or compare it with other electric bikes around the community. So thanks for watching guys. Ride safe.